Sardine?
Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my anniversary reviews. Today we're going to be celebrating the 35th anniversary of the Burbs. Yep, 35 years already for the Burbs. It came out in 1989. I can't believe it. 35 years. I remember watching this film recently before I rewatched it again for this review and thinking this film doesn't look that old and it doesn't feel that old either. And just watching it a couple of days ago for this review, I'm like, I can't believe this has been 35 years. It's unbelievable. So the format is, if you're new to this, guys, is I will just talk about my memories of coming to the Burbs, finding out about the Burbs and watching the movie. A little tiny review within it because it's not really a movie review. And then what I do is I read out comments from you guys of your memories of the Burbs. Now, I can't read them all out, especially for the Burbs, because surprisingly, when I asked you about your memories of the Burbs, the most comments I ever had was for the Burbs. It's unbelievable. So I'm going to read some of them out. I can't read them all out. One thing I do love about all your comments in the Burbs is half the comments that I got from you guys is quotes from the movie. And I didn't realize this myself, but the movie is one of the most quotable movies of all time. If you've seen the Burbs, then you'll absolutely understand that it's full of quotable lines in the film. So I'm looking forward to reading some of those quotes out because they're a laugh to read out. So I'll read them out at the very end. So please stay tuned and watch the full video and hopefully your comment gets read out at the end. Now, as I was born in 1983, yes, I know I'm pretty old now, the movie came out in 1989. So I didn't see this film at the cinema and I didn't see it in its first run. Now, I think I first saw this movie, sadly, in 1999. Yes, 10 years after the movie came out. And that's because we didn't get access to the film for a long time. Movies didn't come out on DVD and VHS 6 months or a year after its theatrical release. And I do believe that it did take 10 years for this movie to get a VHS release in 1999. And then I think a DVD came close after that. So it was not very accessible to us unless we happened to see it on TV, which is quite few and far between. So being from the UK, having the Burbs not be on TV was normal for us. So when I first watched the film, I think it was about 1999, I was still on VHS at the time. I was still loving my horror movies. I was going through that teen slasher phase at the time. But because I was going through that teen slasher phase, I wanted to watch every horror movie I could. I loved those suburban style horror films like Fright Night. You know, you got this little cul-de-sac that they're in and there's kind of no escape. It's sort of like the Monster Squad as well. That little town hall area is very suburban and isolated from the rest of the world. So when I saw a movie like The Burbs, and even watching it now, that little suburban cul-de-sac where there's nowhere to go, it's very eerie. Even if the movie isn't a downright scary horror film, a film like The Burbs, it just makes me feel like very uneasy. It felt like an episode or a movie style episode of Goosebumps or Are You Afraid of the Dark, but a little bit more horror and a little bit more humour. Back then when I watched The Burbs, I was going through that Are You Afraid of the Dark phase. I would watch Nickelodeon, 6:30 at night till 7 o'clock at night. It was time for Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I do remember one specific night at 6:30, I would watch Are You Afraid of the Dark on Nickelodeon. And after it finished, I started to watch The Burbs. And I remember saying, this is like Are You Afraid of the Dark? And as I was watching it, I loved it. It was kind of scary at the time for me. Obviously, it's not that scary now, but I was about 14, 15 years old when I watched it, and I was still getting into my horror films. And I thought, this is quite creepy, quite eerie, but I was in stitches as well because the film was absolutely hilarious. And I just love that mixture between comedy and horror. If you get the comedy right and the horror right, then you've got a great mix there, and you get something that is like The Burbs. So going back to The Burbs, the first time I saw it, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to see this, I learned how to record a VHS onto a VHS, what you would probably call video piracy these days. But I had two VHS players hooked up to each other, and my friend had The Burbs on VHS, and I asked him for a loan of it so I could watch it. So I watched the movie and I absolutely loved it. So the first thing that I had to do was rewatch it again, but to record you would have to put it in the VHS player, watch it and record it at the same time. I had no problem doing that because I love it. And then I had my very own copy of The Burbs. Now, I don't blame people for doing that back in the day because we literally had no access to any film whatsoever. That's how bad it was. We had no internet. We couldn't order on Amazon. There was no DVDs. It was just VHS. And then when you went to a store like the Virgin Megastore at the time or HMV, we didn't get a big selection of good films like that. We only had new movies, so movies that came out in 1998, 1999, 1997, fairly new films, but there was a very small section of older movies. Now, this movie was at the time 10 years old, so to find a 10-year-old film as obscure as The Burbs at the time, it was just hard to get. So when somebody gets it on VHS, you have to pass that around because that's the only way you're going to get to see this film. So to my delight, I now had my own copy of The Burbs on VHS. And funnily enough, the most times that I watched it was round about the summertime when the film seemed to have been set. And some of the comments that you guys have left, which I will read out, a lot of you mentioned it being a really good summer film, and that's exactly what it is. It just felt like that summer horror flick, like the film Summer of '84 that came out a few years ago. Very nostalgic film because it felt a lot like The Burbs, but that was more horror than comedy. Looking back at the film, like I said, I don't think it's dated at all. I think the film is fantastic. The cast was absolutely amazing. Bruce Dern was probably my favourite character in it. Obviously, I love art. Everyone loves art. But there's something about Bruce Dern's portrayal as his character. I just thought, I can relate to that guy now. Maybe I didn't feel like I could relate to him back then. I felt like I'm more related to Tom Hanks. But now watching it, I'm like, that's me. I'm Bruce Dern. Something that I absolutely love watching this every time is thinking that all the families are crazy, all the guys are nuts, and the Klopeks are actually innocent people. And then when it's nearly revealed at the end, when the house blows up and the Klopeks come home, and it turns out that it wasn't Walter in the back garden, maybe they're innocent, and everybody was like, oh no, what have we done? And I still get that sense of, that's quite funny. Could you imagine they went through all of that and the Klopeks were innocent? And you get that feeling when you're watching the movie. And when it turns out, oh my God, they're innocent, you get that feeling of, that's a shame. But then at the very end, when it's a twist and it turns out that the Klopeks are actually bad people and they killed the Naps who actually lived in the house before them, they killed them to take the house, you get a sigh of relief like, we sided with these guys and I'm glad we did because they were right. The Klopeks are actually bad people. So you go through the emotions throughout the film thinking that they're evil, then it turns out they're maybe not, then it turns out they actually are. You get that sense of relief at the end that, yes, it was all worthwhile. The whole movie was worthwhile because we went on that journey with these three guys who are absolutely nutters, but they were right in the very end. So when it was revealed at the end, we were totally satisfied. It was great. I felt sorry for Corey Feldman because I think this was his last movie where he gave his all. He was the Corey Feldman that we all loved. And I did read a trivia page about the Burbs mentioning that Carrie Fisher and the woman who played Bruce Dern's wife in it, they actually mothered him in that film during the filming of it because they could see him exhausted. And he actually went to them to say, I don't think I want to act anymore. I'm too exhausted. I'm still young, but I feel like I've done it all now and I don't want to do it anymore. But they kept on going. They're like, do you know what? Let's just do this film and see how you feel after it. And that's quite nice from Carrie Fisher because she obviously is a motherly figure. So I feel bad watching it knowing that this is Corey Feldman's last true performance. He was in absolute bangers throughout the 80s. He was in The Gremlins, Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, Stand By Me, The Goonies, The Lost Boys. He was everywhere and he was unbelievable in every single film that he was in. And it's a shame because he was also great in The Burbs. And I feel like The Burbs is his last true great performance. To round off my feelings of The Burbs, I do get a sense of nostalgia for it, even though I watched it 10 years after it came out. But when I watched it, I was totally hooked on it, and I was still young at the time anyway, so looking back on it after, for me, about 25 years, I've got that nostalgic feeling for The Burbs. I can smell the summer air back in the late 90s when I watched the movie, because it is a movie that's, I assume, that is set near summertime, and it probably got released in summertime in a lot of places. So looking back on it, I just feel that summer crisp morning as you don't have any school to go to, your parents don't have any work to go to, and you're just relaxing, looking out the window. And as a kid, you would want to look out and look at neighbours and go, I think they're up to something, let's investigate, because that's what you've done as kids. And seeing these adults do it in the film is absolutely hilarious, because you can connect to them even though you're a kid. You can connect to these adults because they're doing childish, outlandish things. It's great. So it's time to get the old trusty phone out, guys, and start reading the comments that you've left. Again, I can't read them all out, but I will read a lot of them out, and hopefully your comment gets read out. So we're going to start with Michael Faulkner. Michael Faulkner said, I got it on Blu-ray, Barry, and watched it just on Monday. I've seen this about 80 times and love it with a passion. Again, I think I've seen it about 80 times as well. Luckily, I've got it on Blu-ray. Don't think it's been announced on 4K yet, but if it does come out in 4K, I will upgrade to the 4K. I feel like I have to do it justice because I got my illegal copy back in VHS, so I had to buy the DVD. I've now bought the Blu-ray, so if it comes out in 4K, I'll certainly buy it in 4K, and hopefully that makes up for me copying VHS to VHS. I'm going to have my tea with me as well, guys. The next comment is from Risico. Risico said, definitely one of my all-time favourite movies. This was my introduction to Tom Hanks, and he's been my favourite actor ever since. So many great memories watching this as a child. Introducing it to my own kids within the last year was simply amazing. Totally agree. You know, this is one of Tom Hanks' best performances and best movies to me as well. And I also recently showed my kids this movie, and they also absolutely loved it. And I hope that they get the same feeling as I did as a kid for the Burbs, and they maybe watch it every now and again, and then hopefully they can introduce the movie to their kids. Matt Pattinson said, it's one of my absolute favourite movies. When I first saw it at a really young age, it really creeped me out and got stuck in my head for years. When I returned to it years later, I began to appreciate just how funny the film is. It always puts a smile on my face every time I watch it now. Totally agree again, Matt. When I watched it as a kid, I saw the more horror and creepy side to it, but as an adult, I see the more humorous side to it now. It's obviously more of a comedy than a horror, but it has got those horror elements, and depending on your age, you maybe prioritise the comedy for the horror if you're an adult, or the horror for the comedy if you're a kid. Snake Raider Pliskin said, was on TV all the time growing up, was a perfect summer movie. Yeah, it was a perfect summer movie, and luckily for you, it was on TV all the time for you, whereas for us, again, if it was on TV, I either didn't have the channel or I missed it. So it was hard to see growing up for us, but it's good that you got to see it all the time. Flick Symmetry said, a quintessential summer flick. See, summer. Saw it with my friends when it came out. We really didn't expect much, but had a blast. When Corey Feldman yelled, "Pizza dude!" the theatre erupted in laughter. We used that line for years to come along with that. That's about a 9 on the tension scale. So this is when the quotes start to come out, guys. But yeah, I actually said that as well. Pizza dude! It kind of reminded me of Donatello from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who was voiced by Corey Feldman.
I called the pizza dude.
Daniel Bauer says, I've never seen that. I've never seen somebody carry their garbage down to the end of the driveway, then bang the hell out of it with a stick. I've never seen that. So that's a quote from Ray.
I've never seen anybody drive their garbage down to the street and then bang the hell out of it with a stick. I've never seen that.
Tino Mattins says, I remember watching this movie on Showtime or HBO. Not really sure, but during summer break for school in the early 90s, I was young and had to just start realising anything with Tom Hanks in it was going to be worth a watch, and a little bit funny because I had seen him in The Bachelor Party and Splash and Bosom Buddies. I didn't know what to expect from this movie, but the minute I saw the guy who played Malachi in Children of the Corn, Courtney Gaines, I was convinced it was going to be a horror comedy, and I wasn't disappointed. Yeah, Courtney Gaines was brilliant in this. I won't even mention him because I know that some people are going to quote some of his lines in it, but Courtney Gaines was fantastic as well. A little creepy dude. What else did you say? Seen it in the early 90s. I mean, I wish I saw it as early as you did. Tom Hanks as well. I mean, I was going through a Tom Hanks phase at the time. I was watching The Money Pit, The Green Mile, anything with Tom Hanks, Saving Private Ryan. At that time, I know he was more of a serious actor when I first watched it in the late 90s, but looking back on his earlier comedies from the 80s. It was great. Tiffany Shante says, I absolutely love this movie. I just watched it again recently. It was one of those movies as a kid that I watched every time it came on cable. While revisiting the film, I was thinking, this is partly what modern films are missing. Good simple stories with great characters, such memorable lines, what a great film. And that's absolutely right, Tiffany, because we are missing films like that. You know, we need those films where the story isn't the most important part for the Burbs. I think it's all about the character development, the characters themselves. The characters are more memorable than the film. The lines in the film are more memorable than the film. And why is that? Because they wrote great characters back in the day. And if you can make a great character and a full cast of great characters, you've got yourself a great film. Michael Stokes said, reminds me of the summer holidays when I was at school. I always get that great feeling of knowing I had 6 weeks of freedom in front of me anytime I watch it. I'll still quite often put it on early Saturday morning to start the weekend with a spring in my step. Great film. And that's great. You know, having those memories of being young and knowing that school's about to finish, you get 6 weeks off and you're watching films like The Burbs where you're off school and you try and copy what they do. So for the full 6 weeks, you go out there and you find yourself creepy neighbours. Mythos Music says, my parents recorded this to VHS, so did I, and I watched it many times growing up in the 80s and 90s. I loved everything about it. Rumsfeld slipping off the roof is one of my favourites. Art getting electrocuted, Ray eating the sardines, Rumsfeld falling through the porch, spilling the brownies. Too much good stuff. Yeah, there's so many great things that happen in this film. So many great moments. So many great quotes in it. It's unforgettable.
Sardine? Sardine?
Christopher Seat says, hey, Pinocchio, where you think you're going?
Hey! Pinocchio! Where are you going?
Man United Fan 88 said, my favourite Tom Hanks film. I remember renting this on VHS back in the 90s. I still use sardine line to this day. Funnily enough, I watched Splash and The Money Pit recently. Tom Hanks' earlier stuff was great. I'd also recommend Bachelor Party and Turn on Hooch. Big was also amazing back then. Yeah, I mean, it's the same films that a lot of people are mentioning because Tom Hanks just was so good back then. I even forgot about Big back in 1988, which was a year earlier than this film. So Tom Hanks was in his prime at the time, especially for comedy. Don Harrison said, favourite line for me is from Bruce Dern, keeping lookout on the roof. Red Rover, let Ray go over. I just loved his face when he was looking at them going over to his commenting. And after it finished, he's like, yeah.
Red Rover, let Ray go over.
Glitz and Gloom said, absolutely love this movie. To this day, I still randomly say, it came with a frame.
Came with the frame. It came with the frame?
Offer people sardine.
Sardine?
And yell out, hair Klopek.
What have you got in the cellar here, Klopek?
Also, you keep a horse in the basement.
You keep a horse in the basement?
And my favourite, Satan is good, Satan is our pal.
Satan is good, Satan is our pal.
A fun fact about that line is, back in 1988 or 89, they were going through a writer's strike, just like we did a few months ago, and a lot of the script wasn't complete, so some of the actors had to improvise in the film, and one of the most funny improvising lines is that, Satan is good, Satan is our pal. They had to improvise most of that, and they got it spot on. Lieutenant Loomis said, saw parts of My Neighbours growing up, then my siblings borrowed it to bring home, but I wasn't allowed to watch the rest of it after Ray's nightmare scenes. So I stayed up and snuck out of my room to finish it, and has been one of my favourites ever since. Great summertime horror flick, so underrated. Yeah, I think that was the scariest part when Ray had that dream, and because when I was watching it, I was like, what's happened here? Is this the big reveal already? But obviously it was just a dream. But watching it as a kid, I'm guessing that could frighten some people. Mike Williams, Dr. Dreadful said, next time I find more piece of crap on my lawn, I'm going to staple his ass shut. Great.
I find one more. Just one. I'm going to catch him and staple his ass shut.
So that's all we've got time for, guys. Again, I say this every week and I'll continue to say it every time I do one of these videos, is I got too many. I absolutely got too many of the Burbs, which is great because I know that now a lot of people love the Burbs even more than I thought did. But I'm glad that everybody commented that did. I did read all the comments. I appreciate every comment. I had a good laugh reading some of the quotes that a lot of you left as well from the movie, because the movie is a very quotable film. So it was great just reading all the memories that you guys had. I did have to read out more memories in this one rather than the quotes. As much as I love the quotes, I think the memories were the most important part, because this is an anniversary review after all, and I prefer to read out more memories than just quotes from the film. But again, enjoyed them all. Anyway guys, that's all we've got for today. Look out for more anniversary reviews coming up. I don't know if you've noticed this, but I usually do one a month for the anniversary review. So look out next month, possibly, for the next review. And as always guys, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!